Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Sean, and I'm here to present today hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. That is a mouthful, so it's HHT for short, and it will be referred to as such here on out. So let's get into it. What is it? This is an autosomal inherited disorder which causes uncommon connections between arteries and veins in the form of arteriovenous malformations, or AVMs for short. It's basically a disconnect, no pun intended, between capillaries in this region, which basically kind of resides in the mucous membranes, which we'll get into a little bit later. But these proteins don't form all the way, and that's what really causes the disconnect between the arteries and veins. Now, if a person does have HHT, it's one of three possible genes that actually contains the mutation. Number one is the E and G gene, which is responsible for type 1, the ACVRL1 gene, which is responsible for type 2, and the SMAD4 gene, which is responsible for type 3. This is inherited from one or potentially both parents via a dominant allele, because it is an autosomal dominant disorder, and it's characterized as such. So what that means is if there's one dominant allele, whether homozygous dominant or heterozygous, that offspring will be affected with this disorder. So in this example here, this Punnett square shows two parents with both the disorder, but both heterozygous. And this is actually this Punnett square is less affected than if one parent did not have the disorder and one parent had a homozygous dominant genotype, because all four children would have the if they had four kids, all four children would have the disorder. In this case, it's only a 75% chance. So it just goes to show the different examples, which will also show that example a little bit later. So what can you expect, or what are the effects of this disorder? As far as presentation of the disease, it usually happens around 6 months of birth, after birth. Reason being is because of the very first symptom and the most dominant symptom, is recurrent nosebleeds. So that's a very normal thing for people to have throughout their life. The frequency with which these nosebleeds happen would be kind of an indication that, hey, maybe there's a little bit something going on here. So definitely very important to work with your PCP if the does happen, because it could be something a little bit more serious. A lesser known symptom is actually GI bleeding, and the most common affected areas of the body, of course, are the nose and GI tract, but lesser known is the lungs, liver, and brain, which can also form these AVMs. So the actual term for the capillaries are called telangiectases, which are basically small and fragile, misformed and undeveloped capillaries, like we talked about earlier. They happen between the arteries and veins, trying to form that connective tissue. So when it doesn't happen within the mucous membranes, that's where the bleeding can kind of start. In the GI tract, it's also known to cause polyps, though that is mainly in the case of type 1 and type 3 HHT. Of course, the telangies that occur in the brain and liver can be more lethal. The brain especially being able to cause aneurysms, and you aren't just likely to get one there, you could get multiple over the course of your life. And that's mostly associated with the ACVRL1 gene and type 2 HHT. So mode of inheritance. It's autosomally dominant, like we talked about. So either parent that contains a dominant allele can pass that on to their offspring. In this example here, like we talked about earlier, this is a homozygous dominant genotype for the male, homozygous recessive for the female, but there's a 100% chance that their kids will have it because there's two dominant alleles mixing with these recessive alleles, creating heterozygous children. So there's a 100% chance in this particular example of inheriting the disorder. This is a heterozygous example via male and a homozygous recessive female, and this is just a 50% chance. So you can see the differences in between homozygous dominant and heterozygous in the ability to pass it on. So it definitely, you would hope to be lucky enough if you do have the disorder to be a heterozygous person. This is an unaffected parents example. So this being an autosomal disorder, inherited disorder, if there is nobody who's affected, then it's just that there's zero chance that you can pass this on, and it cannot be acquired throughout your life. As far as the testing is concerned, testing is available nationwide, and it includes a panel screening, which delving into that a little bit more is a genome sequence capture, targeted next generation sequencing, followed by a qPCR or quantitative polymerase chain reaction, and supplemental Sanger sequencing. So this is a blood draw. You need about 1 ml for DNA extraction and sequencing. And they're looking for variants in the gene sequence, variants in this ENG gene, ACVRL1 gene, SMAD4, but there's also 2 genes which I did not know about before, digging a little deeper, in the RASA1 and GDF2 genes. The turnaround time is 3/4 of a month, about 21 days, 14 and 21 days. Could be longer depending on, as we're seeing kind of out in the world today, supply chain and stuff like that. So the pedigree example, as you can see here at the very top in the P1 generation, is a homozygous dominant male and a homozygous recessive female. And in this example, there's a 100% chance to pass it on to the offspring. So all 4 of the offspring did inherit the disorder. As you can see here in the P1 generation, Brock-Kennens, the heterozygous male, actually did find and mate with someone who also carried the disorder. So all 4 of their children had it, but as luck would have it, you can see in the P2 generation, it's kind of rampant throughout that generation as well, with the offspring just so happen to be that way based on the Punnett squares. But with this type of disorder, every generation will inherit it in some way, shape, or form, even if it is a homozygous or heterozygous of nature. As far as treatments, since this is autosomal, it cannot be cured, but managed with the help of medical professionals. So it comes in the form of 3 ways: hormone-related drugs like Saltimox and Avista, blood vessel blockers like Avastatin, and to a lesser extent Voltaren, and drugs that contribute the slowing of the disintegration of blood clots like cyclopentone and Listetta. So that is the end of the presentation. Hopefully you guys have been a little bit more informed. Interesting disorder. Did not know a lot about it before, kind of digging into it a little bit. I want to thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you guys sticking in. Thanks so much.